Acts chapter 17, verses 19 to 34. Paul on the Areopagus. In the last section, we see that Paul arrived from Thessalonica, and then Silas, Timothy joined him, and he went to the synagogues, told them about Jesus, and then went out and did some street preaching, and this is where he's at with these people on the street. It says in verse 19, Epilavomenite avtu, and having taken hold of him, epi ton Areopagon egagon, they led him unto the Areopagus, legontus, saying. Now, the Areopagus, Areopagon, is described in Wikipedia excellently. I highly recommend reading it. It was a hill. It wasn't a building. It was a hill that people went to where they held court, like the Supreme Court, but it wasn't indoors. And this hill looked out on Athens, and people would go there for different types of cases. And so now, exactly who these people took a hold of him and have taken him up to the Areopagus, they could have taken him to a taverna or Temple of Apollo, all kinds of places. But for some reason, they decided to take him to the Areopagus. That's, in English, the best way of saying it. Not Mars Hill. So they were saying, Vinamatha ganone tis e keni avti e iposu lalumenin didaki. Are we able to know what this new teaching being spoken by you is? You want to know, find out more about it. Asking nicely. In verse 20, Xenizonta gar tina espheris is tas akoa simon. For some things being strange, you insert into our hearing. Haven't heard anything like this, basically the resurrection from the dead. And this being strange, it says in 1 Peter 4:4, in which they think it strange, you are not running together in the same pouring out of carnality, being blasphemous. So strange is something different that they have not heard before. It doesn't have to necessarily be a negative. Could be a positive, I suppose. In this way, it turns out to be a positive for the believing ones of Athens. 1 Peter 4:12, he says, Beloved, do not take it as strange, the burning fire taking place among you to test you, as a strange thing happening to you. So it's strange to some people, and to these people, what he was saying was they weren't used to this. So it must have made quite an impact on them if they would take him and ask him to come up with them to the Areopagus. And they continue, Vulometha un genone ti an theli tafta ene. We want then to know whatever these things will to be. What's it all about? In verse 21, Athenei they patus kei epidhimuntes xeni is uden eteron of Charon. And all Athenians and the immigrating strangers, many people go to Athens, spend their opportune time in nothing else than to tell and to hear something new. Now, they argued over these things and discussed them. Had a friend that was Greek, came to the United States and said one of the things he didn't like about Athens at the time in Greece was the arguments over politics. People get into these horrible arguments over them, just having coffee in the morning. And that's a sad place when civilization becomes like that. And then in verse 22, it continues, Stathiste o Pavlos in meso to Areopagus, and Paul, having stood in the middle of the Areopagus, Ephes said, so apparently they put him up in the top, Andros, Athenae, Katapanta os, this is a hard one, Visi demonesterus. That's a long word. Men Athenians in imas theoru. I view you in all things as ones being reverent of gods. For these gods and statues, mythological beings, were all through the city of Athens, as we mentioned in the last section. Now, being reverent of gods, this word only appears here in the Apostolic Bible Polyglot. Verse 23 continues, they are homenos gar, for going through ke anatheoron ta savasmata imon, and contemplating your objects of worship, evron ke vomon en o epigegrapto. I found also a shrine in which had been inscribed. Now, shrines were all over Athens, little corner boxes, and they'll have a god of Apollo or so forth in these shrines all over the city. So one he saw was inscribed, it says, agnosto theo, to an unknown God. And he says, on whom un agnountes ev savite, who then, not knowing, you are pious towards, because they made a shrine to him, or it. Tuton ego katangelo imin, this one I announce to you. Now, who would know that the man who designed this shrine and put this inscription would end up being one of the most important inscriptions for people of Athens, in that the unknown God? Well, now we'll find out how unknown that God is. It says in verse 24, O theos, O piesos, ton cosmon, ke pantata en av to, the God, having made the cosmos, the world, and all the things in it, utos oranu ketis kyrios iparkon, this one being Lord of heaven and earth, uk in hieropietis neis katiki, does not dwell in handmade temples. You're not going to make anything to put God in, even churches. Verse 25, Ude ipo hieron anthropon therapevete pros theomenos tenos, nor by the hands of men attending, feeling want of anything. So if a man wants to have God do something, no, God's not going to go along with what we want. Now, he can answer prayer, yes, but not a design for us to have him do what we want him to do. Avtos vidus pasi zoin, or himself, God, giving to all zoin, life. Ke panoin, breath, and tapanta, and all things. A feeling want of anything. 1 Samuel 21:15, it has a king of Moab, I believe, or do I feel a want of one's overcome by convulsions, that you carry him being possessed to me? This was David acting like he was crazy and to get into the city away from King Saul. Then later in Proverbs 12:9, it says, better a man with dishonored serving himself than one putting value on himself and feeling a loss of bread. So the loss of bread, or a want of bread, could also be used for the same word. And then it continues in 26, Episete ex enos ematos, and he made from out of one blood pan ethnos anthropon, katikin epi pan toprosopon tis geis, every nation of men to dwell upon all the face of the earth. That is, humans. We are all one, the same. We're all humans. Orisas prostatagmenus kairus ketas orothesias tis katikias avton. He's having confirmed times, having been assigned, times like fall, winter, spring, so forth, and the boundaries of their dwelling, continents, actually islands, and so forth. This is the only place this word for the boundaries appears in the Apostolic Bible Polyglot. In verse 27, he continues, Zitin ton theon, to seek the Lord. These men made to seek the Lord. E arge psilaphisian avton, if then perhaps they might grope after him. So over the thousands and hundreds of how many years the earth has been around, people have been groping for God, trying to understand who he is. He eventually revealed himself to Israel, and now he's revealing himself to the rest of the world. Ke evrian ketige u makran apo enos ekastu imon hiparkonta, and they might find him, though indeed he being not far from each one of us. So God is with us here. He is in our houses, our place of work. When we're walking on a road, we're not alone. God is there. God sees everything, because it mentions even where he says that when people go to the bathroom, the men or women, they carry a shovel and they dig a hole and put everything in it because God walks in the camp. So God is not far from each one of us. This is what Paul's telling them. It's not something man-made. In verse 28, in avtogar zomen, for in him we live, ke kinumatha, and we move, ke esmen, and are. So everything about us is tied to God in one way or another. We don't see it. Some people don't want to believe that God is there. Well, some people believe that the earth was flat. And so belief doesn't make a fact. The fact's a fact. You either see the fact as the fact is and believe it, or you don't believe it. But that doesn't change the fact. And so God is completely within our psyche and within our emotions and things that we have, people around us. Exactly how it all works out with God and that, I don't know. I'm not privy to that special information, but I know he says that he is here. And continues, os ke tenas ton kathimas pi ton irikasi, as also some of the poets among you have said, tu garke genos esmen, for of him we are also a family. Now this was spoken by a man called Aratos o Soli of Cilicia. Aratos, who wrote a book, or he wrote the poem Phenomena, and he was praising the god Zeus, that all humanity is connected to the divine. And this is where these Greeks knew all about this man. He was a real famous poet. And Paul is bringing this up, that this poet said this, but it says plural, poets. I don't know what other one said it, but I looked it up in Wikipedia and found out who said that. In verse 29, Ogenos un hyparkontes to theou, well, being then a family of God, ukophilomen nomizin chryso, we ought not to think gold, argiro, or silver, litho, or stone. God is not made by man of material goods. Haragmati technis, an imprint of a craft, somebody making it. Okay, and themiseos anthropou, in the thinking of man. Man cannot make God. Now, I haven't seen anybody trying to make a God, trying to make God do everything. Do you know anybody? I doubt it. But we are here. Somehow we were created. And this is basically what Paul's bringing out. Not by man. Now, there's been movies like Frankenstein and certain things where it shows man trying to make God, artificial intelligence, things like that, but far from God. In verse 30 then, he says, Tus men un chronus tis agnias iperidon o theos. Indeed then, the times of ignorance God having overlooked. So God allowed people to live on this earth, and they didn't know him, but yet he was there, and they were groping, it said. Tanin parangeli tis anthropis pasi pantaku metanoin. At present, though, he exhorts all men everywhere to repent, metanoin. Now, this means noin is the thinking, meta is a change of thought. I don't think Paul was talking here about sin, because he doesn't bring it up, but to change your thought, what? From these idols, man-made things, to a God that is beyond anything that man can imagine or make, to change your mindset. That's what I'm thinking he's saying here. And then in 31 it continues, Vioti estisan imaran in imeli krinin ten ikumenin indikiasini and andri o orase. For he set a day in which he is about to judge the inhabitable world in righteousness by a man in whom he confirmed, which we know is Jesus. So now, all of a sudden, he's bringing up a thing of repenting, and now he's bringing up this judgment that's going to happen. A few sentences, we have the whole way of talking to people and telling them about the main things of God by a man. And then it says, Pistin paraskon pasin anastisas avton ek nekron, by a man in whom he confirmed, having furnished belief to all, having raised him from the dead ones. Jesus, of course, is the one being raised from the dead ones, but he gives belief to every single person. Everybody can believe in Jesus. God has allowed that to happen. He hasn't kept, somebody with BO can't ever come and believe in somebody. There's no exclusion through belief. Belief is open to everybody through a man that he says who was raised from dead ones. Well, again, that's what brought these people there, to hear about somebody being raised from the dead ones. In verse 32, Akusantes they anastasin nekron, but having heard a resurrection of dead ones, amen eklevaxon, some taunted, made fun of him. Either, but some, Apon said, Akusomathasu palin peri tuto. We'll hear you again concerning this. Ke utos o Pavlos exilthan ek mesu avton. And thus Paul came forth from out of the midst of them. So on this hill, with all these people around listening to what he has to say, and now he's going down back into the city. But it says in 34, Tinas the Andrus colithentos avto, but some men having cleaved to him. So he's leaving, but they're staying with him, going down. The Pesdevsan believed. Amazing. They heard this, but they believed. And is ke Dionysios o Areopagites, of whom also was Dionysus the Areopagite, some person that was there being in the Supreme Court type of a situation, maybe a lawyer or somebody in the judicial system. And ke geni anomati Damaris, and a woman by name Damaris, ke eteri sin aftis, and others with them. So he's got a gathering of people that are coming and wanting to hear more about this Jesus and so forth. And this Dionysus and Damaris, the only places that are mentioned in the Apostolic Bible is right here. So now Paul is finishing up in Athens, and he's going to go into Corinth next.